In this video, we're going to look at file input and output. So up until now, primary way of getting data into our Python program has been through the keyboard. Also, when we looked at pandas, we looked at how we could use the content, read the contents of a CSV file using read CSV and load that into data frame. So in this video, we're gonna go beyond this and look at file input more generically, so more general case than what read CSV allows us to do, because this is important concept in programming. Now on the output side, primary device for output is the screen, the terminal. But it's also possible to have Python program produce output and put it in a file. So in this video, we're going to focus on file as being output and input into a program. Okay, so the examples we're going to be looking at revolve around a text file containing the high and low temperatures for New Haven for March of this year. And you could get the file from this URL. Now, the file contains the highs and lows for one line at a time in the file. So for March 1st, the high is 42 degrees and the low is 23. And then for March 2nd, it's 54 for a high and 25 for a low, and so forth. This only shows the first 6 days of the month, but the file you'll download will have all 31 days. Now, one important detail to mention about how files are represented internally in the computer. So in order for the computer to recognize that after that character 3 ends, at the end of the line, we need to go to the new line. The way it does that, it includes a special character, and that's the \n, and as the line terminator. So this is how Python and other programming languages know that after the 3, we're going to go to the new line. Now, this character is not printable, but it's interpretable by the machine. So it's important for us to know that it's there, because so that we could write our program correctly. So let's look at how first example we're going to look at is to just read the data from a file, and we're just going to read it one line at a time and just output it back to the screen. Now, the function that Python provides us to do this is called open, and open takes as an argument the name of the file and string R, which tells it that we want to read the contents of the file, R for reading. Now, what open returns is a reference to a file object. So the file object is essentially representation of the contents of the file, and we could think of it as the collection of the data contained in the file. So more concretely, let's look at an example. So here we open the file and tell it we want to open it for reading. So that's the second argument over here. And what we get back is this object reference in file, which again, we have to think of as representation of the collection of the data. Now, as a collection, we could iterate through it using the same syntax as we would to iterate through elements in the list. So with a for loop, I'm going to say for record in file, and then so at each iteration of the loop, this is going to read the contents of a single line in the file. So this is record, the first iteration, and then the second iteration, this will be record, so forth. And then we'll keep going until it runs out of data in the file. Now, going back to that note about the line terminator, so when I read the contents of the file one line at a time, what Python is also doing, it's also reading the \n terminator. So if I want to print the contents one line at a time, I need to have the end character with the print being a blank character, because the new line character is already included. So if I exclude this from here, what I'm going to have essentially with every print call to print is two new line characters, so one after the other. And what that will do is cause for there to be a blank line between each record in the file. So you could give that a try if you like, but this illustrates the fact that the new line character is read, from at the end of each line in the file. And then after I'm done processing the contents of the file, it's very important to close the file. So I'm going to use the close method to close the file. Okay, so let's look at a little more elaborate example. So instead of outputting the contents of the file as they occur in the file, I want to compute the average low and the high temperature for March. So as before, I'm going to open the file for reading, and what I'm going to do is create a list of all the low values for the month and all the high values for the month. So in order to compute the average, I'm going to first extract all the highs and the lows, and then that will allow me to compute the average afterwards. So let's suppose our file contains the following values. Let's look at the first 2 days. So let's suppose it's 43 and 22, and let's say we have 52 and 27 for March 2nd. So what we'll end up having is take the high values over here, and we're going to put them in our list highs, one at a time, and then the lows will end up in lows 22, 27, etc. Now the way we're going to do that is we're gonna be reading the records one line at a time as a string. So this is record, and once I read the string, I need to extract the individual values from that string. And the way to accomplish this is using the split method. So if I call split, I get a list 143, 22. So this is going to be index 0, this is index 1, and index 2. So what I'm going to do is put the value at index 1. I'm going to put it in highs, and the value at index 2, I'm going to put in lows. And I do that for every single line in the file. So this is what you see over here. So I split the record, the line from the file, and then I take tokens of 1, which is the high, convert it to an integer and append it to my list highs, which is initially an empty list. So as I iterate through the lines in the file, this list is growing by, these lists are growing by 1 element each with every iteration. And when I'm done, I simply close the file, and now I'm ready to compute the average high and the average low for New Haven by summing all the contents of each of the lists and dividing by the number of elements. So, and then here I use formatted output to output those values using 2 decimal values. So it turns out that the average high is roughly 53 degrees. The average low is 34 degrees. Historically, the expectation is that the average is about 50 degrees. So we've had a warmer March than usual. Okay, we're going to look at a couple alternative methods to get input into the program. So another very useful method is called read lines. And then read lines allows us to read the contents of the entire file all as in one shot. Now, what readline does is that it puts the contents of the file in a list where each element of the list corresponds to one line in the file. So if you look over here, so I did read lines, and now I have this list called file contents. And I close the file, and if I were to output file contents, what I see is that each element in the string, each element in the list is just a string made up of the contents of a single line. And in this case, we see the \n, the terminator, included in there. So if we were going to process this further, we'd need to strip out that \n, because that's not something that we could do any numerical computations with. So this is just a quick example to show you, how to read the contents of the file all at once. Okay, one alternative method to using a for loop and treating the contents of the file as a collection that we could iterate through is to use the readline function. And in this case, what we're going to do, instead of just output the values as they are, we're going to, as we read them, we're going to convert the values to Celsius. So let's see how we do that. So we open the file just as before for reading, and read line, we're going to first read the first line in the file, and using a while loop. So while loop says while line. So what does that really mean? So as long as line has some content in it, is not none, we're going to keep repeating this process. So as long as there's data to read. So we're going to take the line that we just read, we're going to split it as we've done before, and then we're going to convert the value at index 1 to Celsius, that's the high temperature, and then the one at index 2 is the low. So this is the conversion to Celsius, and what we're going to do is output those using formatted output. We're going to output those temperatures, the high and low temperature separated by commas and using 2 decimal digits. And then once we're doing that, we read the next line. So this statement reads the next line, and then we go back again to the beginning of the loop and ask the question, is there contents in that line, or are we at the end of the file? So we keep repeating that process until we exhaust the contents of the file. And as you can see, what we have is the output for the first 10 records in Celsius. So I guess March 9th was a pretty warm day. So this is the example. Now what we're gonna do with this, instead of just simply outputting this data to the screen, we're gonna take this output and write it to a file instead. So this this print line over here is outputting to the string, so outputting to the screen. So instead of doing that, can we output to file instead? So that's what the next example is going to look at. So, and as you're going to see, it's a very minor change to our code. So let's see how we could do that. So first thing is that we still have our input file that's unchanged in file, but now we're going to create an output file, and the output file we're going to call temps_C for Celsius. And because the output we're generating, each the values are separated by commas. So in essence, what we're doing is creating a comma-separated values file. So here the output we're generating is a CSV file, which is something we could read in later to a data frame with pandas. But here we're just creating the CSV file. So, so this is unchanged. The first few lines, these are the same. And now instead of outputting to the screen, I'm going to use outFile, which is a reference to the output file, and write. So the function to write is string. So this writes string, write string to the file referenced by this object. And what I'm going to output is the day of the month, the high temperature, and the low temperature in Celsius. These are the converted values. So I've just replaced my print function, the call to print, with write. And after my loop, I'm going to close the input file and close the output file. And if you look in the same directory where you ran this program, what you're going to find is there's this new file called temps_c.csv. And if you double click on that, you could open that in Excel. That's default. And many other programs could process CSV files. So CSV is text file. And this is what it looks like, which is what we expect. So thank you for listening.